So, for the difference between good and evil, I kind of took the approach of like evil actions tending to be more focused on like the like selfish goals and like how these how achieving these selfish goals comes at the expense of others. And it's kind of in contrast to like good actions where you're kind of putting like your personal goals to the side in order to help other people and trying to better the lives of others over yourself. But then I kind of started to think about this and like how it's really like about the context of like where these actions are occurring in. And one example I came up with is how in like we don't really see like nature as like good or evil. Like so like a lion hunting like an antelope isn't really good, it isn't really evil, it's just like survival. So like even though the lion is kind of putting his like personal like goals of survival above the antelopes, I don't think it can really be deemed as evil because it's out of like survival and like necessity. So then I kind of clarified a little bit how it's different for humans because a lot of these goals are usually like for like economic reasons or like social reasons. Like they'll like maybe like they'll do some kind of plan to ruin some other person to get higher in like the social status, or like a lot of like the white collar crime where there's a lot of twisted things going on in order to make money. So those kind of things aren't really driven by like survival, just kind of like by like these material things that are kind of unique to humans. And I also kind of took the thought about how like in society it kind of means going against the established law, and how like going against like the established law and like codes, you know, like the unspoken codes in society is kind of deemed as evil because you're putting the whole society at risk and by extension other people. So it could be seen as like a selfish thing to go against society. And some of the things I thought were like inherently good in our society, even though like they can be like tax write-offs for like rich people, there's like philanthropy, like using like your own material wealth to better the lives of others. So yeah, overall I thought that like actions in humans, like actions that put others over yourself, are generally perceived as good. So for the creation myths question, I kind of based my whole response about some quote I heard in like a YouTube video or something. I think it was by like H.P. Lovecraft. How like the greatest fear we have is fear of the unknown. So yeah, I kind of based my response around that and how these creation myths help like fill the gap in our knowledge about like the universe and how we got here, why we're here. So I kind of like compared modern to the times when a lot of these creation myths were written, and like the times like 2000 BC and then like in Hebrew times. So even like in modern society where we have like a scientific idea of how we got here, like the Big Bang Theory, we have a really good understanding of like physics and like how like the world around us functions. There are still a lot of people who question like why are we here? What's the point of all of it? And there's still debate going on about whether or not like the universe being created one way or another is the right way to think about it. So if this is the case now, I kind of thought that humans, like just as civilization was starting, would be even more in the dark and more confused and more kind of like grasping at straws for answers. So I think the creation myths like filled the gap in their knowledge here and kind of served as a way to ease this like burning question and let them like move on with their lives and like focus on other things besides like question that even now is almost like impossible to answer, of like why are we here, what are we doing. uh so yeah. And then some of the things I got from other people were how creation myths kind of set us apart and kind of display like the human creativity, and on a little like not so sunshine and rainbows look, kind of like show our like selfishness, because a lot of these creation stories focus heavily on like humans like dominating the world around us, like especially in like the Genesis thing we read, where humans were meant to dominate the world around us and were made in God's image. So yeah, and also another thing I wrote down was that it is kind of, for some people, it's an alternative to like the scientific definitions that kind of don't glorify life as much. Like it's much more like of a, for some people at least, it's much more of a good feeling to think that a higher being created you because, and like in their image, than just a collection of atoms and particles. So yeah. Anything else? Oh yeah, another thing I talked about was how these creation myths kind of serve as a way to lay like the foundation of a civilization's values and morals, and this can serve as a really strong like foundation for a blooming society, especially if it's like a newer ruler connecting themselves with religion, like we kind of talked about with Hammurabi, can really make their reign more secure and give more of a reason for the people to follow them and their code. So yeah. So the next journal entry we had was about the map, or yeah, like the map slash chart we looked at, about how the like percentage of of inhabitants of growing societies belief that God and or religion is necessary for like moral fabric and development of a country. And one of the biggest things I saw was that the places that were just developing, especially some places on like in like Western Africa, where like they had been like war torn for a while after the effects of like slavery and just like natural disasters and international conflict. They were the countries that were relying on God as like moral guidance more. I think this kind of shows how like when all else fails, as far as like human intervention with like government and laws, God can serve as a good way to like unite the people. It's not always the best like first choice because it doesn't really exist in reality. But if like all else fails with like government and like human like intervention to try and like bring them together, God can serve as a way, or belief in God can serve as a way to unite the people. So I think that it makes sense that some of these developing countries that have been in war-torn situations have this like pattern. Another reason it could happen in these like countries that have really struggled in the past was that when you're living in a world where like there's violence all around you and disease, looking for like some kind of hope, and if that be in the form of a god or gods, like that makes some sense, because you're kind of like everywhere you look you only see like negative things. So sometimes you have to like imagine and envision some kind of higher being who has like a plan for all of it, and it's all part of a plan and it'll work out. So once this like moral fabric is like woven inside the population, it makes sense that when they do start developing economically, and when these like this violence starts to die down, this belief still like stays with them. So yeah. Anything else? And that's it. So next one was about a meaningful and fulfilled life, and I went the route of talking about trying to impact the people around you in a positive way, because I think that like if you go through your life like only focusing on bettering yourself, at the end of it all, like you may be living in like a decked out mansion and have like a bunch of sports cars and be in like great shape, but like I feel like most of like your life is dictated by like the connections you make and the bonds you form. And if you only focus on yourself and not trying to better the people around you, at the end of the day you're not gonna have those bonds. So I think that having, like, putting the effort into impacting the people around you in a positive way is a very fulfilling, like, goal and quest, and definitely encapsulates this, like, idea of, like, personal excellence, even though it's not based on you, which is kind of weird. And also, I thought another good idea, kind of, which kind of relates to thinking outside, like, your, like, personal bubble of, like, your own success, is impacting, like, future generations even. So it's kind of like expanding my idea even more, and being able to, like, die at peace thinking that, like, you left a mark that won't disappear just because you do. Like, like, your impact will be felt for years to come, and I think that can definitely is a very fulfilling thing to think about. And also, another thing I talked about was how, like, this idea of a fulfilled life, even though I think that it should be based on, like, building bonds with other people, it's a super subjective thing. So it's not really my place to, like, tell somebody how they should be living their version of a fulfilled life. Like, for me, I don't think the material things matter that much, but I know that's, like, a big part of, like, especially, like, American society, our, like, idea of, like, you have to keep making more money, getting more things, retire with, like, a big house and a lot of money in the bank. So for some people, that is the most fulfilling thing, and it's not really anyone's, like, place to tell somebody what's not fulfilling and what is fulfilling, because it's a super subjective idea. And another thing I talked about, which I kind of borrowed from somebody else, was how, like, finding your own passion and pursuing that passion is also a big part of fulfilling. Because one of the things that can really derail a fulfilled life is, like, having some, like, passion that you feel a great connection towards, and kind of, like, abandoning it, whether it be because, like, you're busy working or other things get in the way. I think making time for, like, any passions you find is really important, because you only get one life, and you don't want to be, like, laying on your deathbed thinking, I really enjoyed basketball or traveling and I couldn't do it because I was busy doing other things. So yeah. And finally, for talking about, like, potential and the importance of potential, this kind of goes back to, like, the fulfillment thing. Personally, for me, I want to be able to, like, look back on my life and feel like I like achieved as much as I could with the time I had on earth and, like, the skills I have. And so, like, and I understand that it's not easy to achieve your full potential, and it might not even be possible depending on who you talk to. But even if, like, so you think that you never will be able to reach your full potential because it's just, like, kind of this, like, thing you can never reach, the journey towards reaching your full potential is still going to yield great results and, like, put you in a lot of, like, great situations and probably meet interesting people and driven people who share this, like, desire. So yeah, I just think that, like, there's a lot of, like, great things to enjoy in life and to explore. So I feel like you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't push yourself to find the things you enjoy and, like, just experience them to the fullest. And yeah.